Hey guys, today I'll take a look at top 5 weird Space Marine units that rarely see play in the competitive scene. However, I am of the opinion that you can make them work, so in this video we'll see how you can do that and whether you need to include them in your list. So without further ado, let's dive right in. The first one in the top 5 is a very unusual one. It's the Fire Strike turret. Released along with the Outrider ATV, I immediately fell in love with this thing because of how cute it looks. It's essentially a mid-toughness vehicle, which is also an artillery piece. Toughness 6, 6 wounds, and 2+ save on them. For this package you are paying 75 points per model and you can have up to 2 models in the unit. They only move 3 inches, so positioning them is going to be your most important task in the beginning of the game, otherwise you're risking not having targets to shoot at during the first, second, perhaps even third turns of the game. So as you already guessed, the move is the biggest limiting factor of this whole package, because as a shooting piece it actually does pretty well. Absolutely do ignore the autocannons. Unfortunately, they're just not good enough. They were actually the best one in the 9th edition because the range on the last Talon, which is the second gun and the one that I recommend now, was only 24 inches, I think. So obviously not enough for a vehicle that only moves 3 inches. Now, the problem with autocannons is their lack of AP. They are only AP1 and you definitely don't have move to be able to draw line of sight precisely and fully to an enemy vehicle, monster, or pretty much anything. So they will always get cover, meaning that you'll have 0 AP. That's not fun, that's not what you want to pay points for, so last Talons it is. And last Talons are pretty good now, they're 36-inch range, so in most cases you will be able to get range on to things that you want to shoot in no man's land. You will not be picking out tanks that are in your opponent's deployment zone though, so that I guess is not really a big problem. There will almost always be something good to shoot at in the no man's land. You'll have 2 shots at strength 10, AP 3, damage D6 with twin linked, and they are hitting on 2s because Tech Marine is piloting this thing, so it's supposed to be very accurate. So for 150 points, you're getting pretty good amount of anti-tank shooting. It's about 7.5 wounds to a toughness 10, 3+ tank that is in cover, or 2+ tank that is not in cover. Definitely not a bad result considering the price of this thing. Plus, also another cool feature it has is that whenever it's firing Overwatch, you are going to be hitting on 4s instead of 6s. So spending a command point to shoot those 4 shots at a target every time it moves within 24 inches of you is going to be a pretty good investment, especially if your target of your shooting is the one that you've nominated for Oath of Moment in your turn and didn't kill it. Then you'll be hitting on 4s, rerolling, and wounding on whatever, rerolling as well. Here's how I think you could use it. The best detachment for it is obviously Gladius, because then in your first turn you can use that D6-inch advance to get the Fire Strike turret into position somewhere where it will be able to draw maximum angles into no man's land, perhaps on the central objectives, and just park it there somewhere in your deployment zone, hoping that it will justify its cost with the shooting. Obviously a very niche kind of use, and yes, we can pay 160 points instead of 150 and get a Gladiator Lancer, but the Lancer will not have this Overwatch capability, so it's kind of a different case. You can also use the turret as your home objective holder with 2 good anti-tank shots. It obviously will struggle if it's charged by, I don't know, a unit of infantry from deep strike, and it doesn't have the footprint to actually cover a lot of your area in the deployment zone, so it's a very niche choice again. I would probably keep it as your anti-tank shooting platform instead, as in the example that we just discussed. As always, I want to remind you about my Patreon 40k coaching service. If you're looking for help building your competitive rosters, preparing you for tournaments, or have any questions about your collection in general, check out the links for my Patreon in the description. Thank you. Next is the Invictor Tactical Warsuit. I've been trying to implement this model into my list since 8th edition when it came out, and there's always something that limits its potential. It's just such a model that has innate problems. In the vast majority of cases, the problem it has was durability, combined with the fact that it always has this sort of early strike rule, which in previous editions it was our modern version of infiltration, so you could deploy it within 9 inches of your opponent's deployment zone. Now it's a scout 8-inch move, but in any case that's just making the model go closer to your opponent turn 1. And because this model was never really that durable, what you were almost always doing is just exposing your vehicle, your rather expensive vehicle, to a lot of pressure turn 1, and because of how mechanics of turns are, you cannot know who goes first, so you will have to position the Invictor in such a way that it kind of is okay whether you go first or your opponent, and that will almost always mean that you will be sacrificing some movement, hiding behind ruins, and then what's the purpose of it being faster? Still though, the 8-inch move and 8-inch scout is not bad for a vehicle of his size, so it's essentially a 16-inch move in turn 1. How I see it potentially being used efficiently is in the Vanguard detachment. If you want to play something more unorthodox compared to the more regular infantry heavy army choices that we usually see with Vanguard, with Centurions, Inceptors, Eradicators, so on. You can add 2 or 3 of these Invictors to the blade-driven deep unit choice, making that pressure on the opponent from turn 1 very, very high. You need to be very careful with this though, because you'll be investing a lot of points into something that will be up front, close to your opponent from the get-go. It means that you possibly want a unit of scouts to actually screen your blade-driven deep unit when it's hiding behind a ruin before it moves out, and obviously all the blade-driven deep rules apply. It needs to be durable, it needs to be fast, and it needs to be lethal, as we discussed already in the how to play Vanguard detachment video. In this case, the Invictors will be that supporting vehicle bulk that is moving behind the blade-driven deep unit, making sure that your opponent has a lot of things to deal with early on. And the logic is that the blade-driven deep unit will be taking up so much of your opponent's attention that the Invictors will actually not be tested in terms of their durability, and in terms of output they are not bad. Their fist is for some reason strength 14, even though the Redemptor fights with strength 12 as well as any other dreadnought as far as I know, so strength 14 is strange, but still that's a good thing for the Invictor, and it's 5 attacks as well. It also has good d6 plus 3 shots flamer at strength 6 AP1 damage 1, or an Iron Hail autocannon, which that is twin-linked, but the problem of AP1 is still here, so I don't like it. Of course, a lot of small arms fire, like heavy bolter, frag grenades, and a bunch of stubber shots. For 140 points that this guy costs, it's not a bad amount of output. Of course, I'm not saying that it's the same efficiency point for point as the Inceptors at 130 points, but it's not bad. Plus, it has a cool shoot back ability, and when in your opponent's shooting phase, a friendly Adeptus Astartes Phobos infantry unit within 6 of this model is shot. So we're thinking like a 10-man jump pack intercessor squad led by Shrike for the Phobos keyword. Someone got too close and within the 12-inch lone up or that the Shrike gives, then you get to shoot back with Invictor, and it can work on multiples of them. Of course, again, a very niche application, but I think it's quite cool. All in all, if you have a relatively optimized list of Vanguard, you might want to consider running a couple of Invictors, because they will add that X factor for your army that might just bring you more efficiency than 140 points would otherwise, especially if you're already maxing out your Eradicators, Inceptors, and Scouts. Next is the Outrider squad. After the initial hype when they were released in the Indomitus box back in 9th edition, and everyone tried using them, they kind of died off and did not really pick up the popularity back in 10th edition yet. Their reason for this are twofold. First, it's the higher cost. They were a bit too expensive for what they do. Now this problem is solved, and they cost 80 points for a 3-man unit, which is some of the most price-efficient point per wound that we get in Codex Space Marine. And that's a toughness 5, which is obviously higher than the other very cheap point per wound models that are the Scouts. For the same 80 points as an Intercessor, 5-man Intercessor squad, you get 12 wounds instead of 10 and toughness 5 instead of toughness 4. You get comparable ranged output because the Intercessors get a bit more shots, but you get twin-linked with the Outrider. The Intercessors do get about 30% more output in melee because of the volume of attacks. However, the Outriders get the AP, but still, all in all, it's about 30% worse. And that's excluding the Sergeant, which obviously the Intercessor Sergeant can carry a Thunderhammer, which does dramatically improve the results of the unit, where the Outriders, for some reason, were always, from the very early on, limited to just the chainswords. And we also did not inherit the rule, which in 9th edition, when the Outriders charged something, they also got the +2, I think, attacks on the charge, which was logical and very cool. and they retain the automatic advance 6 inches, but they did not get the charge bonus back. The speed they have is something that I am very interested in, because they move 12 inches and they have auto advance 6. So depending on the terrain situation, they can be even faster than the jump back intercessors that cost the same 80 points. Sometimes you don't need to go through ruins that much, sometimes you just need to go as far as possible in a straight line, and that's where Outriders are probably unbeatable compared to any other choice. And how I think they can be used rather efficiently in Space Marines is surprisingly as a tough deployment zone unit that can, in a pinch if you need it, to go get a no man's land objective very quickly and reliably. So why am I recommending them above the Scouts, you might think? Well, the Scouts are a great unit to set on the home objective just because they are cheap, and they also have that ability when you can pick them up and then put them down somewhere else. Problem there is that you are doing that picking up at the end of your opponent's turn. So when do you usually need to get onto some objective? It's when you have drawn a card that says that you need to do so. And you only know that when you've already drawn the card. So with your Scouts, because they don't have sticky objectives rule, you will most likely in almost all cases be leaving them on your home objective in order to score it. Unless you have already calculated that you will be holding another objective, so your home objective will be redundant, and then you can pick up the Scouts just in case you draw that card. Outriders, you don't have to gamble like that. You can just have the Outriders on the objective and then draw the card, like, I don't know, extend battle lines. And there may be a situation on the board when the only thing that can actually fulfill that requirement for you to go get that objective are going to be the Outriders, and perhaps you have something else that can sit on your home objective. That's where Outriders are quite interesting for me. And plus their huge 90mm oval bases take up so much space that I think if you calculate, they're probably going to cover more area than a 5-man squad of intercessors. Don't quote me on that, I'm not sure, I've not done the math. My Warhammer brain says to me that this is correct, so it must be. Also, they are more protected from something like a deep striking infantry unit that decided to shoot your home objective scoring unit and move on to that objective next turn, or perhaps this turn if they have shoot and move ability. With Outriders, it won't work, because in order to kill 12 wounds of toughness 5, you need much more output than killing 10 wounds of toughness 4, especially with 4+ save like the Scouts have. So all in all, I think the Outriders are underappreciated in the community, and you might want to look into running them a bit more. Next are the Vanguard Veterans, a very interesting one I wanted to talk about with you for a while now. They were a staple of Space Marine lists of 9th edition. I love them. I have, I think, 16 of them in my Deathwatch collection, but they have seriously fallen out of favor in 10th edition due to the changes to their melee weapon. Back in the beginning of 10th edition, when I have just opened the indexes and I looked at the Vanguard Vets, I could not believe my eyes, because what they've done is essentially sacrilege. They have removed all the Power Fists, all the Thunder Hammers, all the Lightning Claws we loved so much on these guys, and they've replaced them with the Vanguard Veteran weapons. I think they were called heirloom weapons before, but the stat line is the same. It's 4 attacks at strength 5, AP 1, damage 1. Why it is AP 1, you might ask? I don't know. I sincerely want to know why they decided to give them AP 1, because even like Deathwatch Space Marines with the power swords, they have AP2. That's a power weapon. So it used to be AP3, okay, now in 10th edition it's AP2, but AP1 just does not fit anywhere here. So I don't know what the logic was there. I think they just wanted to make everyone stop using the Vanguard Veterans, even though the basic concept of a jump pack infantry marine with ability to get a shield for 4+ invulnerable save and with good melee, one would hope, is still a very interesting and necessary concept. But with these changes, they made them pretty much unusable, even at a fairly efficient price point of 21 points per model. Strength 5 AP1 attacks are not necessarily a death sentence for a unit, as we know from some other armies, other units. Like, for example, one of my favorite infantry choices for Tyranids nowadays are the Raveners. They are essentially the same category, so they move 10 instead of 12, but it's still very fast infantry. And they have 7 attacks each with the same strength 5, AP 1, damage 1, but those attacks are twin linked, so you get a whole bunch more, almost 2 times more attacks. You get twin linked, so you will be getting almost all wounds on target, and they become real shredders of chaff infantry and some light skirmish units. That's what Vanguard Vats could be, but they're not. They just don't have the volume of attacks, and they're supposed to be more anti-elite by their lore. So we need to do something to make them work, and we have that still very good base of 4+ invulnerable save on every model, as I said, and 12-inch move with fly, so it's a very mobile unit that can go through walls, and that's important because it essentially makes it much faster than it actually is. And lethal hits on the charge that you get with their ability kind of solves their problem of lower strength, not completely, but partially. So we need some way to fix their lack of AP, and the only really good way we can do that is permanently with Sanguinary Priest. So by attaching him to the unit, you give them 5+ Feel No Pain and AP2. AP2 is enough for most cases. Yes, it's not awesome, but it's good enough. I play Grey Knight, so I know. And 5+ Feel No Pain in conjunction with 4+ Invulnerable Save is a really nasty combination. I can tell you that because I played my Proteus kill team in 9th edition with Deathwatch, and they were exactly this stat line, and believe me, even when guns were wounding them on 2s, they still were a pain to deal with those 2 wounds and 5+ Feel No Pain and 4+ Invulnerable Save. That in combination with the strength 7 you would get on the charge because of the Sons of Sanguinius detachment, and also 5 attacks each, so 50 attacks per squad, it will turn that 210 points unit into a real danger against pretty much anything that you throw them at, especially something that is mid toughness, but they will still do quite a lot against even a toughness 12 2+ save tank. I think I've calculated that at around 8 or 9 wounds done to the tank, so not bad. That is without the attacks from the Sanguinary Priest or potential stratagems you could use. And against anything that is not 2+ save and toughness 12, they will be absolutely shredding. Or you can run them in Gladius, which is a more orthodox way to do it, and then you have access to extra AP as well, so you can either not run the Sanguinary Priest, which I probably would not recommend unless you are not playing Blood Angels, or you can run them with Sanguinary Priest still and just have that option to go AP3 instead of AP2 with +1 to wound, which you will then need because you will not be getting extra attack and you will not be getting the strength 7. All in all, I think the Vanguard Vats have a couple of ways you can run them nowadays, and because they are not used that often, I think that we might see some points decreases for them in the near future, and as soon as they start hitting that lower 200 mark, maybe 190 even, then they can become really sweet and interesting, because then you will be essentially getting a discount on the cost of the extra character you want to run them with them, and then they will be rather dangerous with those lethal hits that they have. But unfortunately, for now, that's only for Gladius or Sanguinary Priest running detachment. And lastly, the Repulsor Executioner. So this guy is 220 points cost now, and I expect it to probably go a bit lower in the future because they're not run that often nowadays. It can carry 6 Astartes models, or it can carry 3 Gravis models. I'm not going to mention the Centurions because we cannot run a 2-man squad. I don't even know why they're mentioning that in the transport section of this datasheet. My main gripe with the tank is that it has an absolute waste of words in its ability. The ability has a very cool name called Executioner, so you are expecting something very efficient, dramatic, something that will make you want to use that ability more and more, but in essence it gives you +1 to hit against units that are below half strength. So yeah, that will happen sometimes, and you probably will more often than not use this for your anti-infantry guns, which this tank is brimming with them. It has absolutely all of the guns you can imagine, but we wanted to have something cool for the main cannon, and we're not getting that here. Yes, sometimes you will be finishing off tanks, but even still just getting +1 to hit, which you could just get, I don't know, with heavy or anything like that, that's just not impressive. I hope they will change that in the future to something more cool, like, I don't know, rerolls or pretty much anything else. But for now, we have this. Otherwise, we're looking at a pretty good 16 wounds tank with toughness 12, and unfortunately 3+ safe, so we're not getting the land reader levels of durability, but we're close. The main guns that we have are 2 shots at strength 16, AP 4 damage D6 +4, and also 12 shots at strength 6, AP 0 damage 1 with devon. So the big gun is essentially an upgraded version of the gun we have on the Lancer, but without the rerolls. And the onslaught cannon with 12 shots is welcome, because those devastating wounds, in most cases you will be doing 1 or 2 mortal wounds, or devastating wounds I should say, from every volley that you shoot. And that gun is therefore quite efficient against most targets, of course best against toughness 3 infantry with bad armor saves. Again, not a bad set of guns, but desperate for rerolls, and that's why I think that this tank is only usable in the Iron Storm. But there, perhaps carrying a couple of squads of assault intercessors inside, it can do quite a lot of work. You're gonna be paying, what, 40 points more than you would pay for a Lancer, so quite a lot more, but still you're gonna get much more durability here. You will also get a couple of extra guns and the infantry guns, and you have a pretty decent reroll from the detachment. So yes, Lancer will have more rerolls, but in most cases the amount of rerolls you have on the repulsor will be enough. The transport capacity can be quite useful, considering that the Iron Hands detachment can be often quite top heavy, so you don't have enough bodies, and just running 5 assault intercessors in the field might not be cool, and they can die pretty easily without the protection, where inside the repulsor you will always have them on standby when you need them. So when they discount this tank just a bit further down, maybe closer to 210 or maybe even 200 points, I am really thinking of running them in the Iron Storm, so I recommend you to look at maybe dusting them off in your collection. What do you think about my top 5 weird Space Marine units? I might have missed something that is even weirder than these 5, and I think that if you really want to try something cool in your Space Marine list and you are tired of running the same old stuff over and over again, these 5 will not ruin your lists if you use them correctly, as we discussed in this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.